G'day folks, and welcome to Gormo's Shed. And what we're looking at this week is building up a background. And I've done a couple of videos in the past about how to create a panoramic background and how to manipulate it, if you like, and change it to suit what you need. And then there's also a video on how to actually assemble it and print it out onto A4 sheets. I've done that quite successfully in my room here. However, I've also overlaid my backgrounds with other images to develop a different type of background, and sometimes with a bit more depth than what we're used to with just a plain printed background. So I'll give you an example of what I've been doing here, and then we'll sort of get into how I go about it. Now, you may remember that my town background virtually finished here with this little cottage and the street running away off into the background. Well, lately I've added more buildings in, and these are all just printed, and they're individual buildings in some cases, and they're stuck over the top of the background that was there. Now, in some cases, like this corner area here, and we'll just zoom in on that, this is actually 4 different images actually in this area here. The steeple there belongs to the cathedral, I think it is, in Saffron Walden, and the reddish background behind the white houses on the left, or the white shops on the left, is a separate image again, and of course the shops in the front are a separate image again, and it's all laid over a background. And the same sort of theme continues around, and the same sort of ideas and manipulation continues right around here. That's in the middle there, that sort of lightish green in the horizon is part of the original background, but that's been overlaid in this case here with an image of Warwick Castle. And to sort of blend in the let's say foreground with the background, I've overlaid the foreground here with some trees which came from a free download from Wordsworth Model Railway. Now, even though that was a free download, those trees were actually about twice as high as that, and I've cut them in half to sort of not obliterate Warwick Castle in the background. And then it just continues around. I've used the trees in the foreground right around to almost the area where my layout enters what I suppose will be eventually a tunnel, so around to there. Now, what I've got here, folks, is some images I've downloaded off the internet, and you can see that I've cut the sky out of this one, and this one was as is, a little bit of sky etc around the top of it, but that's been cut away. So I've just got the building, same in this one, and this was passed on to me by a member in one of the other forums, and this came off the internet as well. So the internet is a great resource for images, and what you need is to find the larger images if that's possible, so you get better resolution. Something at least, say, 800 by 600 to start with, if not bigger. If you go smaller than that and you've got to enlarge it, it looks all fuzzy and loses definition. Now, folks, we'll use the wall on Bamford here as our sky to sort of give us a background, if you like. And what I like to do before I sort of commit myself to actually sticking these things onto a wall is I use blue tack to put them up in place and just see if it looks right. So I'll put some blue tack on something here, and we'll see how it looks. But first of all, we'll do a test run, and we'll just see, for example, say along here we wanted to have a row of terrace cottages. And now, being a printout, you can print as many of these as you like, and if you use software to sort of manipulate these images, you can change the door colours and all sorts of things, so you can make it look like it's always been there. But something like that just looks pretty plain up against the wall there. So if we take an image like this one that I've downloaded from somewhere and cut out, that wouldn't look too bad behind it. But what we've got to take into account is this area here. Looks as though you're looking down into a sort of, well, actually you're looking down on a river or something there. There's a canal or something there. So that doesn't really suit. If you had the image like that, and you can see the canal over the top of the rooftop, it doesn't really work. But if you start bringing it down, and this is where you've got to use your artistic eye, folks, just that starts to look more feasible. And I mean, you might want to take it a bit lower, so you're just seeing a bit of the rooftops and seeing the cathedral off in the distance there. But that, to me, that doesn't look too bad. So folks, I've just put a couple of spots of blue tack on the back of this thing, and I'll just get an idea of where I want to put it, and then I'll push it onto the wall. So if we say that looks about right, about there I think. Okay, so we'll just push that on. And the critical thing I think too with these images is you've got to be very aware of your horizontal lines, rooftops, etc., and your verticals. For example, the tower on the cathedral there should be vertical. That looks slightly off to the right to me. Not that it matters with just a test run. And I've lost my blue tack now. So we'll just pull that down a bit. That's better. And whack that on there like that. So I think that's a bit better. Anyway, so what we'll do now is I'll put some blue tack on the terraces, and then we'll cover that up. Okay, here we go. I've got some blue tack on there. Again, I'm going to try and get the horizontal as good as I can. That doesn't look too bad actually. That'll do. So there you go. Now you can further enhance this with more images. I mean, I've got this rather odd looking building. I think that's actually in Plymouth. But you know, when you start to add it over whatever's there, I mean, it doesn't look all that wrong when you put it there. So I mean, we could put that there. So I'll do that. Right, let's give it a go. Got some blue tack on there. Now I'll have to match it up with the bottom of the terrace. It's a thing to keep in mind. And this is roughly the right scale for the terrace. So you've got to be aware of your foreground here, your middle ground, and the background, if you like. We can call that distant the background. So if I had this building here directly behind the terrace, it's going to look like it's too close, if you know what I mean. You've got to think about distance when you're doing this. So you can use images on a smaller scale, but you've got to be careful how you do it. Now this is an image that's a slightly smaller scale, and if I put it next to the terrace there, you can see it's way too small. However, if it's placed effectively on the scene, it'll give the illusion of being further away, even depth to some extent. So I'll set that up next to the terrace, and you can see what I mean about the illusion. Right, now folks, I've got a bracket in the way here, but it won't really matter. So this image, you can notice on the right hand side, well, in the front of the image there's a little courtyard in front of the pub. So if we place that next to the terrace, and we have the bottom of the courtyard here at the bottom of the terrace, it then suggests to your eye, when I can stick it down, that pub, it didn't join up very well, that pub is set further back. Now if we just zoom in on that, that's saying to my eye that that's further back than the terrace. Now I haven't done a very good join there, but you can get the idea of what I mean. And if this sounds a bit rushed, folks, the reason it's a bit rushed is the fact that I'm outside at night here in Sydney, and we've got bushfires all over the state. There's currently 100 burning in New South Wales at the moment, and Sydney's full of smoke and will be for days, and the smoke levels are very dangerous. There's small particles in the air which are not good for your health, and so I don't want to be out here too long, so I'm just sort of whizzing through this. Now if we just zoom in a bit more, you can see what I mean there. It looks like that terrace is sitting in front or forward of the pub. Now obviously you need something behind that pub as well, because now you've got that sort of rear scenery sticking up like a sore thumb. So you've got to consider the whole scene before you start developing these things, and probably the best way is to have a full back scene in before you start overlaying it with these images, and then it will start to make more sense. Now that's the original back scene, all the trees and hills and everything. That's the original back scene behind that particular terrace, and that just carries on behind these buildings. However, when you get the buildings laying over the top of the back scene and then sort of sticking up into the sky a bit, you think, oh yeah, that makes sense. Well, it does to me anyway. And you can even overlay bits and pieces with trees in them and everything, and it all just seems to make sense to my eye. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I've got a crazy eye, but there you go. So in a nutshell, that's how it's done, folks. So I hope that sort of makes sense to you. Obviously, when you download these images, they need to be sealed. And once you've printed them out, I use a matte sealer, a Boyle's matte sealer, and give the back of the paper and the front of the paper good coats of sealer. I think Boyle's suggest about 4 coats on each side, obviously, and that'll stop the image absorbing moisture and gradually losing its colour over time. And it's a bit of an artistic thing, but you've got to sort of have in mind something that you would like to create, and then go and find the images to help you do that. You could start with say a Pico sky background, or any of the sky backgrounds that are available, and build up your town scene in front of that if you wanted to. Or you can get a countryside background and lay over the top of that. It's all up to you. There's no particular rule about it, but what you've got to keep in mind is the foreground, the midground and the background. So the scale of whatever you put in there has to look right to your eye. You can't have a foreground picture like, say, the terraces with another foreground picture behind that, and then something way off in the background. It's just going to look wrong. You've got to sort of suggest you're moving from one to the logical next one to the logical next one. As you're looking, it's getting further and further away, so the scale of the buildings, if we're using buildings, is getting smaller and smaller as the further away they're supposed to be, if that makes sense. Anyway, folks, I'm going inside and I'm getting out of the smoke, and probably watch some TV. So I'll see you next time. Cheers, Gormo.